Johan de Nysschen, President of Audi of America.
I'm wondering if there's a better way of doing this by maybe doing tax credits, tax incentives to the customer based on the type of car that they buy.
I think we need a holistic approach. We need to have feasible targets for fuel consumption, for emissions, that are also economically, realistically attainable. What is really at issue is also the long-term interest of society, but also the individual consumer. Consumers are demanding efficient vehicles, and each one of us is driven by an economic self-imperative. And the consumer doesn't want to pay more for the technology that is required to meet some of the standards being proposed by some policymakers. And the reality is that the auto industry also cannot wave a magic wand and make the investments that are required into the technologies to produce these fuel consumption figures. And so you end up in a reality trap. And I think what is necessary is that there needs to be a cooperative approach with policymakers being well informed of what is attainable and what is not. And I think that the automotive industry too needs to also understand, and I think that we do, that the status quo cannot be maintained. We all want to produce vehicles that are more efficient and have less impact on the environment. We share this planet too. We also have families and children and next generations that we care for.
Involve the consumer as well.
Yes, absolutely we do. And we need to take the interests of the individual consumer and the greater good of society into account. And I really have to say that with the greatest amount of respect to many of our policymakers, I have no doubt that they have good intentions at heart. But they need to also be open-minded and be willing to assimilate information to help them to make the correct and high-quality decisions.
The only country that seems to still have the low gas price and no tax incentive for purchasing and no tax liability for purchasing. Do you see, you work in other countries, how does that affect the auto industry in those other countries?
If I take the example of energy policy in Europe and say Japan, it's very clear that policymakers there have recognized that the good capitalistic principle of an economic imperative is the most efficient mechanism to direct consumer behavior. People are driven by economic fundamentals. And we all might have greater altruistic goals for concern for the environment, but ultimately it's the pocketbook, how it affects you in the pocket and the checkbook that accounts for your behavior. And here they've taken tax policy, and they have regulated various forms of fuels and the affordability thereof through taxation on the fuel. And this is the major difference in America, because it has been politically unpopular to even talk about taxation on fuel. It's also behind the taxation policy that we have on diesel fuel, because it was viewed historically as not for private consumers, it's for commercial operators, and therefore doesn't impact as many votes as you do if you affect the broader consumer base. And I think here too, it is the way that I guess the American political system is established that is driving this behavior.
Johan de Nysschen, thank you very much.
Thank you.